When did this album come out?
1986.
Oh, really? They formed in 82.
Yeah.
And they didn't have an album until 86.
Yep. There is a demo tape thing. It's called the Yellow Tape that was sold at concerts and stuff like that. But this is the first quote unquote studio album that came out.
Are you holding that microphone up or you have a stand?
I mean, it's got a stand. I can set it up. It's just actually easier for me to do it this way.
I totally have the podcast mic
Right.
here.
See, you got the super duper mic there.
I'm starting to take it seriously, dude.
You look like a DJ.
Yeah, an aging DJ.
Well, I think all DJs at this point in time are aging DJs. All right, we're recording.
We have been recording, so
I'm just going to go ahead and do what the intro I thought about doing. Hello, everybody. It's time to go inside the birdhouse with Lewis and Sean, a retrospective podcast of the music of They Might Be Giants. My name is Sean Mason.
And I am Louis Reyes.
Just a little background on the both of us. I was a part of a podcast for a long time. I think, Louis, you've done podcasts.
Nothing like you.
Leader.
Sean did a podcast called Warped, which was attempted to watch and respond to every single Star Trek.
It was a fool's errand. We got pretty far into the next generation.
Dude, you got through the entire first season and most of the films and into most of Next Generation.
We got into the 6th season of Next Generation. Literally, the next episode was supposed to be the first episode of Deep Space Nine, which was the whole reason I was doing the podcast in the first place, but we won't talk about that.
Right, and the thing is, we were originally planning on maybe doing a Deep Space Nine podcast, but then suddenly you were like, They Might Be Giants, and I'm like, right on, let's do They Might Be Giants.
Well, one thing I thought about was there are 10,000 million Star Trek podcasts out there, and
and those guys are nerds.
Yes, real nerds. Not like us cool guys.
No, not like the hip people.
And I thought about just a background of mine. They Might Be Giants is my favorite band of all time. I've been a huge fan since the early 90s when I first heard the album Flood. Sort of changed my life. I was this nerdy kid who didn't really understand how the world worked, where my position in it was. Then I listened to these two super nerds playing rock music and being rock stars, and I realized, there are people like me out in the world.
Yeah, with a lot of songs about being out of place and not knowing your place in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They don't write a lot of love songs, but they do write them sometimes, or breakup songs. They always understand exactly the mentality I've had in those moments. Well, let me explain what we're doing here on the podcast before we get into that. First of all, what we're doing is we're going to go song by song in chronological order. It's called OCD, and if you've got it, you know what I'm talking about.
Sean and I were roommates for many years, and ordering songs
yes,
to a rule set is a big part of your life.
Yes, exactly. I still do that. Still listen to my albums in order. So we're going to go song by song. Today we'll be starting with the track 1 of the first album, They Might Be Giants, the self-titled album, sometimes also referred to as the Pink Album. Before we get into that, I'm just going to tell you real quick my introduction to the band. I think a lot of people my age got introduced to the band watching a show called Tiny Toons. They were kid versions of all the Looney Tunes characters. In one episode, they do videos to Istanbul, Not Constantinople, and Particle Man. It's the first time I'd ever heard their songs. It blew my mind. They had the weirdest voice I'd ever heard in a rock song. John Linnell's voice is very distinct. And then somebody I knew had the album Flood, which had just come out.
When did it come out? When did Flood
1990.
come out? Oh my God, really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was so late.
Yeah, it was probably, I'd probably heard it in 91, but I know the album came out.
Is Istanbul?
Yeah, both of those songs are on Flood.
Particle Man and Istanbul are both on Flood.
Both on Flood.
And Birdhouse in Your Soul?
And Birdhouse is on
Oh my God,
too.
it's like a super album.
It is their most famous, it's the only album I think they've ever had go platinum. So, and I've been a huge fan ever since. I listened to every album. I've listened to their solo stuff. I love it all.
The children's stuff too?
I love the children's stuff. I raised my kids on it. We will get to those albums as well. Those are all on the list. They'll be there. Anyways, so that's where I am. Louis, I know you came to them a little bit later, I think.
I was aware of that there was a band called They Might Be Giants and that they were nerdy and that cool nerds listened to them, but I didn't myself get into it. In high school, I had a friend named Darren Mack. He was a fan.
Okay.
But it wasn't like we sat around listening to those albums because we were in theater and doing other things. But I think I went over to his house once and he was playing it. This must have been around 1991.
Probably. I mean, that's when most people found them, I think.
I know that when I recollect that moment, I had a feeling they'd been around for a while.
Sure.
And so I wasn't listening like that there's this new band out.
Yeah. I grew up in the sticks. I grew up in the desert out in California. So we didn't have alternative radio. You know, that's where most people heard. If you lived in New York, and I know if you lived in LA, maybe you heard them sometimes on the radio, but where I was, I didn't, and they probably not in Orange County either. I don't doubt.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in Orange County. They did have kind of what they considered alternative radio. We were close enough to Long Beach, obviously, that there was alternative radio that I just didn't really listen to it.
Gotcha.
Like, I had terrible music tastes.
So did I back then.
Until college.
That was the thing. It's like all I listened to was just absolute garbage back then. And then all of a sudden this clouds opened up and I was like, oh my God, this band that they do whatever the hell they want. They clearly don't take studio notes. Like you can tell they've never written a song that they didn't want to write themselves. Like maybe they have written songs that they're like, I really want to see if I can get a song on the radio, but I don't believe that. Just listening to their music, you're like, there's no way they ever thought this was going to get on the radio.
They were definitely writing for their fans. And the rest of my exposure was, basically in high school, I was like, okay. And every once in a while I heard Birdhouse of Your Soul.
Sure.
Great. It wasn't until after college when you started getting the idea to write that They Might Be Giants musical that I was just like, oh my God, how much material do they have? And these are incredible songs and they're stylistically different from each other and yet still belong in the same universe. And that's when I really started listening to them and listening to whole albums and digging them. And again, I was never the super fan you were, but I did see them 3 times live at different concerts with you.
So of course. Yeah.
I don't think there was a single They Might Be Giants concert I didn't go to that you also weren't.
Yeah, I don't know. Probably. I doubt it. I don't know why else you would have gone. Real quick on the band itself, if you don't know who They Might Be Giants are, John Linnell and John Flansburgh, the two of them, it was just a duo. One played keyboards and the other played guitar. By the time I ever saw them live, they already had the full band. I know they used to do concerts where they had a tape, which was all of their backing drums, and the rhythm section was all on a tape that they just played to. They actually still do that sometimes. Back in Brooklyn, I've never seen them tour with it, but I guess they do still do shows with the tape. They started in 1982. They both grew up in Massachusetts. They met in high school, but they both kind of moved to Brooklyn separately and then met there. You know, it was kind of the end of the New York punk scene, was kind of on the way down. You know, I would say they kind of are punk just because they do whatever the hell they want.
I would say they're total punk.
You know,
I would totally classify them as a punk band.
You would call them more, obviously it's more of a modern punk, and obviously they don't fit into that classic hard.
It's punk ethos as opposed to punk style.
Sure. You know, the Lou Reed type of punk where it's not, that's the
Velvet
attitude,
Underground type thing.
But it's also, you're talking about two nerds. And so they talk about things that they know about. Their lyrics, just talking about the lyrics, they don't tell you this is the feelings that I was feeling in the moment that something happened. What they do is they just tell you the banal story of these basic things that happen. And if you just let that invoke in you what you felt during the time when you did those things, that's where all of the understanding comes from. The other genius thing, I think, is generally their songs are very upbeat, but they will sing about some of the most depressing things.
Pet Names is one of my favorite songs, and it ended up being on a playlist, a music playlist that I put together for my daughter.
Yeah.
And again, it's kind of a little low key, but it totally evokes what you're talking about, which is that feeling of talking about the banality of that moment as opposed to the drama of the moment. You infer the drama from the banality of this, what feels like a breakup to me, right?
It's clearly about a couple that just cannot figure it out.
Right, exactly. They may not have broken up, but something is missing now.
They can't just be together. There's always something that's causing them to break up. And they can't, and even that isn't even really a thing that probably doesn't make sense. It just, they can't do it. But today we're not doing that. We're not going there. Like I said, we're doing this in order because that's the way my mind works.
Because you're OCD.
Yeah, it's my OCD. So we're starting with the They Might Be Giants debut album. It's self-titled. Like I said, sometimes they refer to it as the Pink Album. And the first track on that album is called Everything Right Is Wrong Again.
So first of all, thematically speaking, isn't it great that they start their entire music career with this?
Yeah, just the title alone, you're like, of course. Everything Right Is Wrong Again. But so the album came out November 4th, 1986. And its most famous song is probably Don't Let's Start.
Yeah.
I think that's...
Which again, because I listened to the album, leading up to this, I listened to the album, like the whole album a few times. And I think I texted you about how much I love Don't Let's Start, the rhythmic structure of it. Anyway, that's another episode.
That's only a couple of weeks. It's an early track. But I've listened to this song hundreds of times. You've probably listened to it more recently because I think you were. What are your impressions of the song?
It's so complicated to have impressions that They Might Be Giant songs, right? Because it hits you on many levels. First of all, it hits you lyrically, it hits you musically, it hits you stylistically. My first impression was the reference to the Long Long Trailer that ends up, but it's not a passing reference. It feels like it infects the song.
Absolutely.
And I remember that movie playing on TV growing up, right? So it's like, I know it. Of course, they must have as well.
Sure.
I'm just wondering why that movie? Like, what? And it's like the scene in which it's only one scene. It's the scene in which Desi Arnaz gets in the car, is pulling the trailer while Lucy is cooking, and it's just chaos.
Right.
It's only that scene.
They're not a band that makes a lot of pop culture references.
And their first song,
the very first song and the very first lyric goes straight to, now, we're not talking about the most...
I was going to say, it's arguable that it's pop culture.
Right. It's a weird, obscure movie. For those of you who don't know, The Long Long Trailer is a Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball 1954 movie directed by Vincent Minnelli about a couple who, instead of buying a house when they get married, they decide to buy a trailer because the husband's job is he goes on business. So she decides that, why don't we get a trailer? That way I can go with you everywhere you go on business. And antics ensue, essentially. Like Lewis was saying, the reference that they're talking about, the dishes kept in, no one would stop to save them, is all about a scene in which she's trying to cook and dishes are flying everywhere. And in classic I Love Lucy style, right? But it's really funny too, because they're not playing the characters from I Love Lucy.
Well, no, I mean they are, but
right?
They're not those particular.
They don't carry the name though. I would just say it's not like they're doing a I Love Lucy movie. But yeah, to me it's very free because there are some they reference, but for the most part they're not one of those bands who you would know what era they're singing from because of the references they make in their music. And like even then, you're talking about in '86 they released a song that's referencing a movie that's 30 years old.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, it's 32 years old at the point they're making the allusion to it, and almost everybody's exposure to it is on daytime television where they just running a weekend movie. Like, in other words, no one's doing revivals of this film.
Right.
Like, no one's considering this film like an important cinematic achievement.
This isn't a movie that we all rented. I doubt any of us have ever seen it in its entirety from start to finish.
I cannot say I have.
We've all just caught bits and pieces of it as it was on, because back in when, not to age ourselves, but back when Lewis and I were kids, there were 8 channels you could watch on TV, and if you were home and there was nothing else to do, you just watched what was on. At least that's what I did. Lewis probably
and I watched
read.
bits and pieces of the long trailer. And the thing is, I was never also interested in it. Like, it bored me pretty quickly, right?
Oh, I would promise you I would not have watched that movie for more than 5 minutes. Like, this was not my thing either. But like you said, I know that they're pretty much, they're a little bit older than us, I think. I mean, they're probably...
yeah, how old are they, actually, just to get a reference?
My guess is they're in their 60s.
I will...
So they might be 10 years older than us.
Flansburgh is 65.
65?
He was born in 1960.
Wow.
Yeah, so they were... Oh, my God. Well, they were 26.
They were in their early 20s. When they started, they were in their early 20s.
Lennell's the same age. He was
I think they're the same
He's a little
age.
older, but he's 65. So. You saw them recently at that cruise. Did they look 65?
I mean, they look older. I mean, they definitely are older. There's no doubt about that, but they still rock. But anyways, back to the song. Like you say, it starts with this weird reference. Well, I think also it announces itself pretty cool. When you get that first bum, and then it goes right into, and now, like I say, they might be giant songs, not long.
There's no real musical intro like there typically is in pop music, right?
Yeah.
Where they kind of play like 4 bars before they come in. They just go, da-da.
Yeah, and then they're right into the chorus.
Yeah, so what is Everything Right Is Wrong Again to you?
Invoking that movie and that scene kind of sums it up for me personally.
Yeah.
The movie is about this newlywed couple, right? That's supposed to be a good, right thing.
But it's wrong again, meaning it used to be wrong.
But isn't that kind of what we go through? Every time you think you've done something right, something wrong goes,
right.
You know, it's just not to be like, oh, it's all about life or anything. Like, I don't know. The one thing I will say about them, they will not discuss what their songs are about.
Yeah, which is great. That's why we can have this podcast.
Which is awesome. Their songs are what you make of them.
So let's go to the next line. And nobody would stop to save her. Of course, no one would stop to save her. Des just had to stop driving.
Right.
So I never
He's the only
thought
one that could.
Who would?
Right. In the moments where wrong things are happening, there aren't a lot of people that can save you.
And then the next line is, wake me when it's over, touch my face, tell me every word has been erased. Wake me when it's over could be when you're in that situation that everything's going wrong, wake me when it's over. But then I'm also thinking, you're watching the movie and you're like, wake me when it's over.
Right, sure. They're lyrically, they are so out there sometimes. He says why the cupboard's not appealing. And I think that's back to the referencing the movie again, right? Because the dishes are flying out of the cupboard. And
tell me every word has been erased. What's going on there? Touch my face. Tell me every word has been erased. Everything right is wrong again, meaning when you let's say I got into a relationship and now it's going south, so it's wrong again. And you're watching this movie in which chaos is happening and a relationship is falling apart. And you're like, wake me when it's over, touch my face, tell me every word has been erased, meaning everything I said in that relationship.
It's God.
I don't want to even face it.
Right. Could also be from a standpoint of, in the moment where everything went wrong, I said all of these things.
Right.
Tell me when I want to be right again.
Right. Erase the words. I said.
Everything that I said, right? Because that's the only way to make things right again.
Why the cupboard's not appealing. I mean, that's obviously back a reference,
right,
as you said, to
and then
to
don't you get the feeling that, and then it goes right back into everything that's right is wrong again, saying like, no matter what you do to make things right after they go wrong, the cycle repeats itself. Assuming that they're kind of using that movie as the reference point, right? That movie must have meant something.
Right, or that scene did.
Or at least that scene. John Linnell is the singer. He's the lead singer on the song.
Yeah.
I assume he wrote it. Most of the time, they write the songs that they sing.
Right.
For some reason, at least that scene comes to him from the cupboard's not appealing. Just the fact that you have cupboards isn't going to fix the problem.
Right.
If the moment is too much for it.
The thing about the cupboards is that this is almost replicating a home.
Sure.
In an environment that should not have a home.
Right, exactly. Like you're trying to, but it's also like that's security, right? If you've got cupboards there, but in a moment like that, they offer you no security. And that's why you go back into, now here's the weird one. You're a weasel overcome with dinge.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what the word dinge means.
Yeah, it's kind of where dingy comes from, like dirty, unclean.
So basically, it's a death reference. A weasel overcome with dinge is probably a weasel that's about to die.
Not before the damage done. The healing doesn't stop the feeling. Okay. You're a weasel overcome with dinge. I see. Weasel overcome, but not before the damage. I see. Yeah. You can't bounce back.
Right.
Once you're dirtied like that.
A weasel is generally a reference to a bad person, right?
Yeah.
You did the bad thing, and that part of you is starting to die, but you've already done the damage. The weasel in you was dying.
Yes. And so the healing doesn't stop the feeling.
Right.
that you're healing, but you can't let go of this horrible sense that wrong was done.
Right. And all the good that you try to do now isn't going to stop the feeling that you've already done to people.
This is already like way more emotionally complex than I could ever be.
God, like Lewis is a songwriter. I think a brilliant songwriter. I'll just say it.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it.
But yeah, like you look at this again, they're not telling you anything.
But here's the thing with my songwriting. My answer was to write more words.
Sure.
Right? Their version is to really pare the words down.
Right. So then they go back into the chorus again. And then they repeat over and over again, the song is over now.
For when I first re-listened to this, I go, oh my God, that was a short song.
Yeah, right.
But no.
It's not over.
The song is over now, and the song is over now, and the song is over now. Everything right is wrong. That kind of like weird space.
Yeah, there's
like,
a bunch of stuff going on at this point in time. I guess that you would call this the bridge.
The thing that really struck me here is it's the music itself is giving you the feeling of not being grounded and being kind of thrown about.
Right.
Which alludes to the long trailer.
Yes, exactly. Which they say everything right is wrong again. Every movement false. Every 4 is waltz again. Every 5 and dime's been gained and spent. I think the song in general is a nostalgia thing, right? Somebody thinking back on a time.
There was a time in your life where everything was right.
Right. And then it all went wrong.
Yeah.
Again and again and again.
That could be childhood. That could be middle school or high school. Or there's a point in everybody's life that's like, oh my God, I'm happier than I've ever been. And then the world comes back.
Right, exactly.
With a vengeance.
And the dishes will keep flying, right?
The dishes keep flying, and you feel like you're walking through molasses.
Well, I mean, that is life, right? There's always moments in time where you just feel like, I don't understand what's going on in my life, and everything seems to be happening without my permission and without my, and no matter what I do to stop it, nothing seems to fix the problem.
And then there's this next line, tell me that you like my float upstream, draw the line dividing, laugh and scream.
Right.
That's a dark line.
I know, right? He was talking about a body floating upstream, laughing and screaming. There's, the terror and the laughter. It's exactly the same, right? It's the same.
Right, and there's a point at which things get so horrible you have to laugh. Just like in the long trailer, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's a moment where it's horrible, and then it's just like, it cracks into comedy because you just can't. This is why comedians are so good at addressing our current political climate. There's a point at which it becomes so horrifying that you have to laugh, right? Your only survival tactic
is to laugh.
And your only ability to make sense of it is to find the humor in it.
You just completely shut down, right?
Exactly. You either shut down or you laugh.
There's the
two responses.
Yes,
to,
exactly.
Trauma, right? Tell me that, I just want to read that line again. Tell me that you like my float upstream, draw the line dividing, laugh and scream. Ugh.
I mean, when this is in their early 20s, guys.
We always knew they were smart.
And completely super humble. They know they're smart. They don't need to prove it.
Yeah. This next line I kind of feel could be about a relationship.
Yeah.
It can be about yourself, right?
Right.
You know everything that I know, so I know you've heard the voice that makes the silent noise. Right?
it's either a person saying like, he's talking to himself, looking back on things, saying, I know you know everything because or like you say, a relationship, you generally, when you're in a relationship with somebody, that's one person that may know everything that you know.
And if it's falling apart, I mean, I like to think that this is somebody on their own. They're watching the Long Run Trailer at 3 a.m. on the couch, and their life sucks.
I believe 100%. You could tell me that he had broken up with someone and was alone at home watching the Long Run Trailer at 3 a.m, and that's when he wrote this song.
There was a time in my life in 2008 when I broke up with Claire and I moved in with Jason. Remember that? The Tokyo Pop job just completely fizzled after 6 years, and I was looking for something else to do, and I started working for a company that was doing proposals to install phone systems in prisons. So they, writing proposals to government agencies to try to do this, right? And I was hating life, and mine was going home after work to Jason and Brianna's house, and they were basically having a long form breakup. Right. And so I kind of just holed myself up in my room drinking and watching Rescue Me, that HBO show. That is not a good show to help one feel better about yourself.
Sure, yeah.
But it was funny.
Right.
Sitting there with that kind of like, what did I do? Everything's wrong again. And then, of course, 3 months later, I'm back with Claire.
Sure. Well, which was
now,
a very good decision on your part.
15 years at one kid into a wonderful family.
Right.
But
you've heard the voice that makes a silent noise. Obviously, that's the voice in your head, right?
Is the silent noise.
It's a silent noise. Nobody else hears it but you. But it is a noise, man. You ever try to, if you've got the voices in your head going and try to fall asleep at night?
Because I'm also thinking it could be a scream, like in your head. Still, right. It's the same thing.
Sure, right? But I think it is the concept of somebody just screaming in their own head, right?
You've heard the voice that makes the silent noise that says that. I say, you know everything that I know, so I know you've heard the voice that makes the silent noise that says that. Oh my God, that's so amazing.
And then they just go back into the choruses again.
Yeah, and they bring up the weasel thing again.
Yeah, they bring up the weasel. They bring up the long trailer.
The dishes.
And then they again repeat, the song is over now, only this time they're not lying. This time the song actually ends. So many pop bands have long musical outros, right? Or they fade out and stuff like that. And they're one of those bands that just bump in the song.
Sometimes they do have something that's kind of cool. Like again, going back to Pet Names.
Yeah.
There's a groove to it that they sort of they indulge themselves.
Right.
But that's the exception to the rule.
Oh, they'll do it, but it's rare. And it's usually only when the song like a song like Pet Names. You can't just end that song. You need that groove because that song is so heavy lyrically.
And the groove itself is letting you sit with the thought.
Exactly. It's a very, this cool, I mean, I love the bass line in that song. I think it's maybe their best. It's so
We're gonna have that's gonna be such a good episode, people.
We'll talk about that song for 3 hours. But yeah, so that's the song. I probably heard this song the first time because, like I said, 1991, I think, is when I first got into, and then I started buying their other albums because I heard Flood. Shortly after that, the next album, Apollo 18, comes out, so I'd heard that. Then I went back and started listening to their earlier albums, and so it was probably around 92 or so when I first heard this album. And I will say, across the album, as someone who had listened to Flood a lot, which Flood is probably their most pop accessible album.
Though I'm trying to get Anthea into Birdhouse of Your Soul.
Yeah.
And it's just not sticking. There's something.
Yeah,
I'm sometimes. Like, what? How could she respond to Pet Names and not respond to Birdhouse of Your Soul?
And then I listened to this, and now this song, there are very poppy songs on this album, but it has a lot. You've probably been listening to it. There are some songs in there that are less accessible as you go along.
it's a balance, right?
Right.
It's like if every song was exactly like this, I mean,
And I guess as I have listened to these, I love more and more out there stuff. You know, the more inaccessible stuff becomes some of my favorite stuff at this point in time. But back then, I wasn't a huge fan of the album in general. There were a few songs I liked at first.
right.
This being one of them, just because it was so, to me, the whole concept of referencing the Long Long Trailer just made my dumbass think that was hilarious when I was in high school.
In true punk fashion, there are 19 tracks.
But yeah, it's a 38-minute long album, and it's got 19 tracks.
Put Your Hand Inside the Puppet Head is great.
Yes.
Don't Let's Start, obviously, we talked about that. But there are weird ones like the Hideaway Folk Family.
There are a few They Might Be Giant songs I don't listen to. Hideaway Folk Family is one of them.
Well, when we get to that, what appears to be now the fifth episode.
The fifth episode, yes.
We'll try to break it down. We'll try to find the good in it.
We'll figure it out. She's an Angel is one of my all-time favorites.
Is that what the character of
Yes,
Angel in
100%.
your musical is based on?
Yeah.
And then Chespeace Face, who's the
Chespeace
antagonist.
Face, another
in your
character
musical.
from the musical. Yes, is based on that. I mean, Chespeace Face, to me, that song should be a Bond theme.
Well, you made him into a Bond villain.
I made
That's
him
what
into a
sounds-
Bond villain.
At some point, we'll get to talking about your musical specifically.
I'm looking forward to this. I think this is going to be fun. Like I said, I love this band. I love their music. You're never going to read the same message from two songs, I don't think.
Or if you do, they complement each other somehow.
Right.
Like there's
It's
new
not,
insight.
and I think a lot of that will have to do with us. You know, they're one of those bands that the way you interpret a song is probably right. Even if it's not what they intended. I mean, then I know, and I've heard in interviews, they'll say that, well, what do you think the song's about? Then, okay, yeah, that's right. You're right. That's what that song's about. So,
have they ever, in interviews or anything, talked about the true life story that motivated a song, like a relationship or anything like that? Or are they pretty?
I have, as
Right
far as
about
I
that
know,
song.
they are so super cloistered about what their songs are about. I've read some fan theories on songs. And some of them I think are probably pretty accurate just based on what the lyrics are and things. What does it mean to you? It doesn't matter what it means to us.
This podcast is kind of also about us, right? And I
Right,
talked
sure.
about that moment where I broke up with Claire and put me into a state that felt very like
that
this.
song. Yeah.
Can I ask the same question for you? Can you point to a time in your life where
I mean,
this
look,
song-
I will say that there was a time, it was right when we had met, actually, when I had gotten kicked out of school. And
the Blanche
my long-term
relationship
relationship ended because I
Right.
got broken up with. I was everything was wrong.
right?
Again and again and again. And it was like, you start to look back at like what everything the past like 5 years of my life at that point in time had been, everything was right. And then
Right.
you start looking back and you're like, no, that was wrong. That was wrong.
Right.
You made the wrong decisions in these moments where if you'd have made a different decision, we wouldn't be here right now.
It's not that time was right.
Right.
That time was wrong.
Right.
It's just that you have perspective on it.
You talk about everything right is wrong. In the moment, every decision you made felt right. But then when you get to that point where you realize it wasn't,
Yeah.
you start to think about all the decisions you made that felt right and were clearly wrong.
Yeah. Once you sort of expose that one decision you made that was wrong,
Yeah.
suddenly all of the other ones come
Right.
to light. You know, and again, I think that probably was me. Like, because I broke up with Claire. Like, when I said, hey, you're going to New York, dude, I don't want a long distance relationship. I think we should break up. She was like, okay.
And I think it takes, for me, I've always said that was my rock bottom. And at that moment, I realized, you know what, my life's probably going to be okay in general, because if this is my rock bottom, it's not that bad. You know?
I would say my rock bottom was the last few months of 2008.
And you're like, okay,
yeah,
well,
that was
you
my
know,
rock
but
bottom as well.
You weren't out on the street, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
you were
exactly,
You had
yeah.
an apartment, you had a place to stay.
Yeah, you're right. I guess this Everything Right is Wrong Again is kind of about your rock bottom moment, I guess.
He's using the concept of the film he's at rock bottom and is trying to figure out, and he's up at 3 a.m, and that's the only thing on TV, and that's what he's watching.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing about like people who aren't a total train wreck at their rock bottom, like you said.
Yeah.
Like they might be giants, like they're not heroin addicts.
Right,
They're like they're like laying in the bathroom of a punk club at 4 a.m., you know.
They're both middle-class kids from Massachusetts.
Yeah, they're kind of more similar to us,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So the rock bottom hurts, but it's a different kind of rock bottom. Yeah, it's not like it's like you can't point to those. I always thought to myself, like, because being in the band, being in Jacaranda with you and everybody else, like, oh my God, I'm not up enough to be like a rock star, right? It's like,
So that's I think that's episode 1. Yeah, next week we'll be talking about
Put Your Hand Inside the Puppet Head. I again love this song.
We'll talk to you next week.
Everything right is wrong.